For all of my people that struggle with lust, you're going to want to watch this whole entire PowerPoint because we are talking about the yogic view of lust and how to actually overcome it. Now, I did make a PowerPoint about the origins of desire. If you haven't seen that, I recommend watching that. It's a good precursor to this video. But without further ado, let's dive into the PowerPoint. So copyright, you know how I do, table of contents, pause the video and read that if you want to. So, what lust really is. In yogic traditions, lust is not just sexual desire. It is a bit deeper than that. You see, lust is energy that has been directed outward, become grasping, and has gotten tied to your identity. And what I mean by that is when someone feels lustful, they begin to desire something outside of themselves and they tend to cling onto the thing which they desire, and they even tie it to their identity by saying, I am horny, right? They identify with that energy of being horny or lustful, right? So lust is often explained as desire that has become distorted by ignorance. That means that lust is not treated as moral failure. And that's important to understand. It's not about shaming yourself. It's not that you did something wrong. Lust is simply just treated as misdirected life force. And that's what needs to be understood. So let's actually define lust a bit deeper. Lust is not just I find someone attractive. It's more like I feel incomplete. That person will completely, and I need that person. So lust is really just desire plus the illusion of fulfillment plus a loss of your inner center. You begin to desire certain things. You think that it's going to fulfill you, and you have lost that inner fulfillment that would make you not want to seek fulfillment outside of yourself. And this is why yogic traditions separate natural desire from lust, because it's desire on top of several other things. You believe that you acting on this desire is going to fulfill you because inherently you do not feel fulfilled inside of yourself. So when all these things come together, you start to get the energy of lust. So where lust actually comes from. Yogic traditions say that lust comes from three main things. Number one is ignorance, meaning that you're misperceiving reality. In these lustful states, you tend to mistake yourself for the body and the mind instead of the awareness that's observing these things. You identify with the emotion that the body is feeling, and you also identify with the thoughts inside of your mind, opposed to the thing that's observing the thoughts in the body and is ultimately detached from the thoughts and the body. Now, the second aspect is downward moving energy. This is the force that pulls energy into physical expression. And then number three is samskaras, which are mental impressions or past conditioning. I have a whole entire PowerPoint about karma. And inside that PowerPoint, we mentioned samskaras. So if you want to get deeper into these concepts, go watch that karma PowerPoint. But essentially, samskaras deal with old habits, repeated thoughts, and sensory patterns that stay in the mind and get triggered again later. So lust comes from these three things: ignorance, downward moving energy, and your past conditioning that makes you believe that acting on a certain thing will provide you with a certain sense of fulfillment. So here is why lust is so strong. Lust is powerful because it touches three things at once. It touches survival, it touches pleasure, and it touches identity. This is why it can feel so intense. Lust does not just say, I want. It also says, I am desirable, I can possess, I am not complete without this. And this is why lust strengthens the ego or the sense of I, because You need to believe that you are a certain character in order to even be lustful. When you access who you truly are beyond your character, lust doesn't really form because you naturally will feel complete and whole inside of yourself. So if you do not feel complete and whole inside of yourself, you try to possess things outside of yourself. And you actively trying to get something outside of yourself reinforces the idea that you are the character and not the source of the character. You see? Why it appears suddenly. So lust can feel random, but yogic traditions say that it's not random. It usually shows up when a stored pattern gets triggered. This can happen through a visual trigger, a memory, a thought, a fantasy, or a sensory impression. Then the mind starts building a story around it and the energy becomes stronger. So, for example, you might scroll on Instagram and then you see, if you're a guy, you might see a nice voluptuous booty. And you're like, oh my God, that's a nice voluptuous booty. I want me some booty. You know, you start to first you see something and then you form a story around it, right? Oh my God, that's a nice voluptuous booty. That joint moving, that joint shaking. I need that, you know? Also a memory. You could think about a past time when you had intercourse. You could think about a person that you used to be with. You could simply have a memory about somebody that you saw outside. And then you start to form a story around it. Oh my God, that person was so pretty. I wish I would have talked to them. I kind of want to do things with them. You see what I'm saying? And then so on and so forth. Whenever you have a trigger, something pops up and then you form a story that tells you essentially that you need to act off of whatever you're feeling. Oh, I feel desire right now. I need to act out that desire and fulfill my lustful urges. That's typically how we tend to do things, you see? So, what is the real meaning behind lust? At a deeper level, lust is actually a distorted form of the desire for union, not just physical union. It is the longing to dissolve separation. It is the pull towards wholeness. It is the urge to merge back into unity. But because of ignorance, that infinite longing gets projected onto a finite body or person. So, what should have become union with truth, reality, or the divine becomes a fixation on something or someone outside of you. So, this is why if you naturally feel whole inside of yourself, you don't really get lustful because you do not think that something outside you is going to complete you or fulfill you. When you feel the lust, it's really just a deeper sign that some part of you is seeking to reunify back to who you truly are. But you're mistaking that for the need to physically unify with a person and have intercourse with them. You see? So let's understand desire versus lust. Yogic traditions do not say that all desire is bad. They make a clear distinction. Pure desire is natural, open, and not binding. Lust is compulsive, identity driven, and binding. Understand that you can feel attraction for somebody without losing clarity. You can feel attraction without needing possession, and you can feel attraction without being controlled by it. So just because someone's attractive doesn't mean that you start just thinking all these thoughts and losing your clarity, and then you think I gotta have this person, I gotta be with them, and then you can't control your urges, and you act off them you didn't want to act off them. You see, you could feel attraction but still not go through these things. So if you feel attraction but then you also start to lose your clarity, you start wanting to possess something, this begins to show you how your desire is becoming distorted because now it's turning into this lust and a need to get something outside of yourself in order to feel internally fulfilled. Now let's understand prana, aka life force energy, and downward flow. What people call lust is often linked to the downward moving current of life force energy. This is called apana vayu. That's what it's called in Sanskrit, at least. Apana governs elimination, grounding, survival, and sexual and reproductive functions. More subtly, It is the force that pulls energy into density, form, and physical expression. Downward flow is not bad. It is a part of embodied life. Without it, you could not live physically, you could not act, you could not build or reproduce. So, although I'm saying that lust is tied to the downward flow of prana, that doesn't mean that the downward flow is bad. The thing is, you need energy to come into your body so that way you can act inside the outside world. But with lust, that downward energy oftentimes gets trapped. So, we're going to talk more about that as we go into this video. Let's first understand why energy moves downward in the first place. So energy moves downward when consciousness is oriented towards the body as your identity. It also moves downward through sensory engagement, repeated stimulation, and unprocessed mental impressions. So if you are constantly pulled by visuals, touch, fantasy, or habit, then energy tends to go downward and then outward. That's actually natural. Understand, though, that the problem is not the downward movement itself. The problem is when it gets stuck there. So, essentially, anytime you get more engaged with the body and your outside world, energy begins to move down, which once again isn't bad. You need energy to move down and outward in order to engage with the world. That's not an issue. The problem is when it gets stuck down there. So let's talk about why energy builds up. Energy builds up when it is stimulated but not consciously experienced. For example, you see something, you think about it, then you fantasize. So energy is now stimulated because you're fantasizing and whatnot, but you're not consciously experiencing it. You're just building it up inside of yourself. Understand that when you go through seeing something, then you think about it, then you fantasize, you do not stay aware of the raw sensation. And because of this, the energy begins to loop. This is also what happens when there is resistance and indulgence at the same time. You resist the feeling, but you also mentally feel it. This creates friction. That friction causes heat. This heat creates intensity. Intensity is what most people experience as lust. So let's talk about that a bit more, right? Rather than just feeling the raw energy, you tend to think about it, right? So when you see something, that might invoke a certain energy. You see an attractive person, you feel a certain energy. That's not inherently bad if you just process the raw sensation, but instead, once you feel the energy, people tend to think about it, they'll fantasize, and they get super involved. And now the energy is kind of just building inside of them because they keep on fantasizing about it. Now, people will also try to resist the lust. They try to resist the feeling while also engaging with the feeling. And it starts to build this friction until you eventually pop, and then you act off your lust, and then you know what happens from there, you see? So let's talk about the exact moment that this energy becomes lust. Lust is not the same thing as energy. It becomes lust when three things lock together: sensation in the body, mental image or fantasy, and then identification, when you start to think, I need this or I want this, because now you're identifying with the feeling in the body. So before you went through that whole process, it was just life force energy. After that, it becomes compulsive, directed, and binding. You see, if it was just a sensation in the body and then you simply let that pass, you would be fine. But once people feel the sensation, they start to think about it. They start to fantasize. Oh my God, I want to experience that. I need that. I want that. I feel horny. They start to identify with the feeling, and now it actually turns into lust. You see? Now, let's talk about downward flow and upward flow. Yogic traditions do not say to stop downward flow. They actually say to let energy move in its full circuit. So downward flow deals with embodiment, sensation, and grounding. Upward flow deals with awareness, clarity, and expansion. Healthy flow means the energy moves down, is fully felt, and then naturally rises again. The key is awareness, not force. And I want to say this real quick. I made a video reacting to an ancient Chinese energetic cultivation system. In that video, a lady gave a practice where you essentially breathe energy up your body and down the body, up your body and down the body. That's actually a good practice to keep your life force energy healthy with the upward flow and the downward flow. So I recommend watching that video and practicing that practice if you haven't seen it and you don't do the practice already, especially if you struggle with lust. So, what does balanced energy feel like? Understand that when downward energy is experienced properly, it feels heavy, warm, grounded, and present. There is no panic, there's no obsession, and there's no feeling that you must act immediately. When that same energy rises, it becomes lighter, it becomes more clear, and it becomes more open. It can become love, creativity, insight, or devotion. So the difference is not the energy itself. The difference is direction and awareness. It's the same energy, just being directed in different ways and being understood in different ways. You see? So here's why people get stuck in lust. People get stuck because the cycle gets broken. They stimulate downward energy flow. They interrupt awareness, and this eventually blocks upward movement. So the energy never completes the full circuit. This leads to repetition, craving, and compulsion. This is why lust keeps returning when it's not understood properly. As soon as energy flows downward, they immediately they might either resist how it feels or they get super involved in how it feels, which interrupts the process of going back up. Now it just stays down there and it begins to build up until you get super lustful and then act on your lust. So let's talk about the psychological shift. The big shift is this. You go from I must control this energy to eventually saying I must understand and witness this energy. Trying to control your life force energy from the ego will usually cause suppression or indulgence. Suppression says this is bad. Indulgence says this is me. I am lustful. I am horny, right? But see, like people go through these two things where it's like, oh no, I don't want to feel that. I shouldn't feel lustful. No, 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 no. They suppress it. Or they'll just say, nigga, I'm horny. I'm trying to get into it. What's up? You see? Both of these keep you stuck. The correct relationship is to actually allow the feeling and to witness it and not collapse into it. You simply just let it come up and then let it pass without all the extra stuff. So here are 3 wrong ways that people relate to energy. The first wrong way is indulgence, where they say, essentially, I feel it, so I follow it. I feel lustful, I act off lust. The second wrong way is suppression. I feel it and now I fight it. The third wrong way is spiritualized avoidance. I transcend it, so I ignore the body. All 3 of these create imbalance. The better way is to stay aware, stay grounded, and let the energy move without becoming your identity. You can try to ignore the body all you want, but now your energy might just stay up and never go back down, and that could cause other issues, you see? And because let's rephrase that. You can transcend lust. But when I say transcend in this sense, this with the spiritual avoidance is really just you trying to transcend the body, but you're not genuinely doing that. You're just trying to ignore what's going on inside of you, and that's not real transcendence. And because you're trying to ignore certain things, your energy might stay up here and cause issues, or when it drops back down, you're cooked. You see? So yeah, here's the correct approach. The correct approach is to allow the energy, witness the energy, and do not collapse into thought, fantasy, or identity. This lets energy move through you without hijacking you. The body feels it, but the mind does not turn it into a story of something you need to act upon. And the energy can now complete its movement naturally. What balance actually looks like. Balanced energy is not numbness. It does not mean that you never feel desire. It means that desire does not control you. Downward flow feels grounded and stable. Upward flow feels open and clear. There is no war between the two. It becomes one continuous movement instead of a conflict. So now let's get into some practices in order to overcome lust. Practice 1. Feel the raw sensation. When the energy arises, put your attention directly in the body. Do not focus on a specific person, image, or fantasy. Feel the raw sensation itself, such as heat, pressure, pulsing, or movement. Yogic traditions say that what you fully feel without resistance or story will naturally transform. So if you fully feel it without identifying with it, without thinking about how to act off it, without all the extra shit, you simply just feel without resistance, it begins to naturally transform and dissolve. Practice number 2, spine awareness. Sit or stand with awareness along your spine. Feel the vertical axis of the body. Do not force energy upward. Just create the pathway through your attention. In yogic language, where attention goes, energy follows. So if you simply just place your awareness on going up and down the spine without trying to force it, the energy will begin to naturally follow the path which your awareness is creating for it. Practice number 3, breath integration. Use your breath to harmonize the system. Inhale and feel expansion upward through the chest and the head. Exhale and feel grounding downwards towards the pelvis and the base of your spine. This teaches the body that upward and downward movement are a part of one cycle. They are not enemies. Practice number 4, stay still at peak intensity. The hardest moment is when the energy peaks. That is usually when people act out or clamp down. Instead, stay still internally. Do not mentally engage, do not suppress, and do not feed the story. If you stay aware in this state, the energy can often reverse direction on its own. So this might seem like something that's hard to do, but I promise you if you do it, it will work. Practice number 5, reduce fragmentation. Lust gets worse when life is fragmented. So if you are going through constant scrolling online or constant novelty, you always want to experience certain new things and new desires. If you're constantly stimulated, if you spend too much time in thought and not enough time in the body, these things will fragment your life and your energy. So to stabilize your energy, reduce unnecessary input. Spend more time in presence and stay connected to the body during your normal everyday life. So let's talk about some real life scenarios. Here's an example of the visual trigger. Somebody sees an attractive person and energy rises instantly. If the mind starts to fantasize, lust begins to form. But if the person simply feels the body sensation without story, the energy can rise into openness instead of craving. Here's another example of build-up and release. So when someone keeps on feeding small triggers all day, energy begins to build up. If it is never processed, it eventually bursts out as release or compulsion. But if each surge is felt immediately in the body, the energy does not have to explode later. It keeps moving instead of storing pressure. So essentially, you can feel small, lustful energies throughout the whole entire day. But if you keep on feeding them, if you keep on diving into them without simply just feeling them and letting them pass, it begins to build up. It begins to form a certain pressure, and then eventually things begin to burst. Here's another example of suppression and rebound. So if someone believes that lust is bad and they try to crush it, the energy gets blocked. It does not disappear, it compresses. Later, it often returns stronger. That creates shame and intensity. The better method is not suppression. The better method is full awareness without indulgence. So, here's a daily routine that you can do, which can help you to deal with lust if you struggle with it. So, in the morning time, sit still, feel the spine, and use your breath to set the direction of the day. Breathe up and down the spine, direct your energy like that, and set your intent for your energy to move like that all day throughout your day. And then during the day, reduce stimulation, stay in the body, and notice energy quickly when it arises. In the evening time, do a body scan, especially through the lower centers, and reflect on where energy got stuck, and then allow that energy to simply just express itself inside of your being without you thinking about it, identifying with it, acting off of it, etc. So, here is a method for what to do in the moment. Once you feel lust, stop. Drop into the body, feel the raw sensation, remove the mental images and the thoughts that surround the energy, and simply just stay present at peak intensity. The goal is not to fight the energy. The goal is to stay conscious while it moves. Now, here are some lifestyle factors. Understand that physical movement helps to keep prana circulating. So if you're working out, this will help you. If you don't work out, please work out, not just because of this, but because it's good for you. You want to be healthy. You know what I'm saying? You want to have some kind of strength inside of your body. So please work out if you don't work out. Understand that creative output is also important because sexual energy and creative energy are closely connected. If that energy is not expressed through building, creating, learning, or making something, it can naturally default into turning into lust. Sleep also matters because poor sleep lowers your awareness and increases impulsivity. So here's what progress looks like. Progress does not mean that you never feel desire again. What it means is that you notice lust faster. You do not immediately act on it. You can feel it without spiraling mentally. The energy transforms faster, and eventually it rarely becomes lust at all. So progress is not getting rid of the feeling, but rather changing your relationship to it and approaching it from a different angle. So, the final insight. You do not overcome lust by fighting it. You outgrow it by no longer misperceiving the energy behind it. The same force that becomes lust can also become devotion, clarity, creativity, and realization. When awareness is present, the cycle completes naturally. And that is what you need to understand about lust and how to overcome it. So, for all my people that struggle, take heed to this advice and do the practices. I'm going to end this video right here. I love you. I'm going to catch you. Peace. The freak out. You smell me.